Welcome to the conversation. My name is Benjamin Dixon. I'm host of the Benjamin Dixon Show, filling in here for the conversation. And I'm proud to be joined this afternoon by Lex STEPPLING. He is the director of policy and campaigns for Dignity and Power Now. Lex, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
There's a lot happening in context of the type of work that you do with Defund the Police, or in your case, Defund the Sheriff. We've been following the situation out of Kenosha, Wisconsin, with the shooting of Jacob Blake. And I just kind of want to start there because of the egregious nature of that shooting. In the work that you do in LA and LA County, just kind of give us some insight of what you saw when you saw that video and how you think the work that you're doing kind of intersects with that.
Yeah, well, I saw what everybody else saw, and I saw what everybody continues to see. And I think the volume with which we continue to see it is overwhelming. I don't think any of us seek to lose faith in our institutions. I don't think most of us want our institutions to be failed, to be discredited. In the case of law enforcement, that has happened. And in many cases, when an institution discredits itself or fails to deliver the service that we count on it for, the failure itself is not fatal, does not cost lives. In the case of law enforcement, their failures are deadly, they're ongoing, they're continuous. And unfortunately, when you ask, what's my initial way of relating it to what's happening here in Los Angeles and the work that we do, just a couple of days ago, Pasadena Police Department shot Anthony McClain in the back and murdered him. And we could go on and on and on. We could spend our whole conversation listing the names of people that are taken from us by law enforcement.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so unfortunate and so true. I've been doing this work for 5 years, and there are just so many names and so many hashtags that after a while, the names start overlapping. You've been doing this work, at least you've been doing some organizing for 7 years now, organizing nationally to help push towards a, quote, future free from punitive punishment systems and towards a vision of healing and justice. Tell us about your work specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this work my whole life, and as is the case with many people, it's not something you seek as a career. Most of the time, we are responding organically to what is, in fact, a crisis. It's a generational crisis, and it's a crisis that right now is being acutely felt by people for a number of reasons. One of which I think is that we're in an era where there's been a democratization of information, where there are cameras, where there's the ability to see the thing that used to be the thing that we just talked about. Right. What was kind of an anecdotal and experiential truth that people shared and fought for and hoped others would believe is now being seen by everybody. And I think it happening in plain sight with such kind of shocking clarity and such ugliness and such horror is forcing a conversation to happen that is actually long overdue. And when I say, we work at Dignity and Power Now to try to create and organize towards a future free of punitive punishment systems, free of state violence, it's the reality of these departments. And you mentioned the police, you mentioned the sheriffs. We're also talking about the courts. We're talking about probation departments. We're talking about district attorneys' offices. We're talking about surveillance. We're talking about the jails themselves. Corrections departments. It's not just the police officer on the street or the sheriff on the street, but it's a whole system that has been built. And whatever the intentions were in the beginning, the way it functions now is a system that enacts a level of violence that is simply unacceptable, a level of corruption that is unacceptable, and the lack of transparency in an era where we get to acquire transparency so easily kind of speaks to what a failure it is and how kind of divergent their function is from the interests of the community, from the needs of the community, and from the kind of collective desire we all have for safety. Yeah. And we understand that, comprehensive community-based systems of care, access to public health models, access to social health models, is not a novel concept. Whenever it's been funded, whenever it's thrived, whenever it's been accessible at a community level, everybody has benefited, and the public safety benefits have been exponential. Oftentimes, though, those kinds of programs are the first things to be cut. Yeah. And, we're living in 40 years of Reaganomics and austerity where the only things that haven't been cut have been the police and the military. And unfortunately, that imbalance is kind of presenting itself in a really stark and tragic way right now.
I think one of the things that out of everything I'm hearing you saying, I think you're connecting the dots. And I think that a lot of times those dots aren't connected in the minds of non-Black people. Could you help connect those dots a little closer? This is what I always say on my show. I say the police state was started and first in there, and it was honed in the Black community, but it was never going to stay there. And we've seen so many instances. I think the story of Daniel Shaver is the one that always comes to mind, where the police state has executed white people too, but there seems to be a disconnect with Black lives versus all lives matter and white lives matter and those types of things. But connect the dots with this carceral state that you just described and make the case of why it's as important to non-Black people as it is to Black people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good way that you frame the question, because we get stuck in this debate all the time, and it's not really a debate. What it is that we get faced with a certain kind of defensiveness from certain people who are made uncomfortable when there's a racial justice analysis applied to the question of structural violence and state violence. And so one of those kind of defensive responses is often, well, it happens to white people too. And that's true. It happens to everybody. And that speaks to the fact that it's a crisis. Communities that are seen as non-white, communities that are seen as Black, communities that are underserved are targeted by policing, are over-policed, are saturated with the presence of police. And that allows for more of these instances. And no matter what anyone says about what the numbers reflect, I mean, a basic understanding of how one sources information can speak to the fact that it is heightened and more concentrated in Black communities, or communities that are profiled as Black, or communities that are being gentrified away from Blackness and into something else that brings a new kind of police presence. But the point is that everybody is a victim of state violence. Everybody is a victim of bad policing. And police departments, law enforcement departments have proven at this point that the reform approaches that have been attempted and well-funded, and really so much effort has been put forth for decades, have ultimately failed. That doesn't mean there might have been, isolated incidents of progress. Of course, we understand there are individuals in all of these departments who mean well, but the point that we all have to face, whether we like to face it or not, is that these are failed institutions that are not only failing to make the community safer, they're not only failing to be the arbiters of public safety, but they're actually causing communities to be less safe. Yeah. And what you said around that call-in and that connect the dots, I do think it is still very hard for a segment of our country to understand that for most people, police do not represent safety, but in fact represent something antithetic to safety.
Yeah. There's a survey that was done by the Black Male Voter Project that asked what's the number one issue for Black men in certain communities. And they said public safety. But when they defined public safety, it was safety from police. Which I think underscores what you said right there. I want to talk specifically, with the time that we have left, about your Defund the Sheriff campaign and how it connects to, obviously, the Defund the Police campaign, and how you're focusing on trying to reduce the amount of violence that's happening in LA County jails.
Sure. There's not a singular campaign called Defund the Sheriff, but Defund the Sheriff is a call to action. But there are several campaigns operating towards a reallocation of resources, a divestment from law enforcement, a divestment from these failed institutions, and an investment in the community-based systems of care that we all deserve. So campaigns like the Justice LA campaign, which successfully stopped LA County from investing almost $4 billion into expanding what was already the largest jail system on the planet, and instead now has terminated that effort and is now pushing towards a vision of a comprehensive public safety set of outcomes that would involve all relevant departments. And it's an incredibly transformative vision that lives in inside what is called the Alternatives to Incarceration Work Group, which was kind of the democratic process that was born out of our successful effort to stop the jail plan. And it's very dense, but contains several pieces of a roadmap towards a Los Angeles that for the first time, will not be the leader in all of the wrong things, but can become the leader in the right things with regards to investing in care, investing in public health, investing in social health determinants, investing in housing, etc. And then there's another campaign that's coming in November, will be on the ballot. It's a campaign, it's a campaign now for a measure that will be on the county ballot here in Los Angeles called Reimagine LA, which is a genuine opportunity for people to understand and be grounded in what the defund conversation actually looks like. Which is simply put, when we take resources away from things that have failed us, from things that cause us harm, from things that are wasteful, from things that kill members of our community, and take those things and put them into the things that are lacking, like housing, like access to health care, like access to social health care, et cetera, we will see exponential public safety benefits. And this goes along with the effort to continue to decarcerate all of our cities across the country, because what has been proven, and this is something that is not an argument to had, it's undeniable, is that everywhere where we've seen large amounts of people decarcerated, and we've seen jail numbers drop rapidly, public safety has gone up. And that's a fact. And there's a lot of reasons that I'm sure we could talk through. I know we don't have time, but that's something that we are continuing to organize towards, because everybody benefits from that reality.
Right, right. We have to definitely make some more time for us to continue this conversation. Lex Steppling, Director of Policy and Campaigns for Dignity and Power Now. Thank you so much for joining me, brother.
Likewise. Thank you. Take care.
You too.
2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below. Then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.